Hey, it's Janet Dagley with another Riverside rant. Poor Chad Bianco. It's no surprise that I'm not a fan of Riverside County Sheriff and Trump sycophant Chad Bianco. But right now, my heart goes out to him. Pobrecito. For years, Bianco has tried to position himself as Donald Trump's #1 fan. Whatever position Mr. MAGA took, Bianco contorted himself to match it. Even when Trump was convicted in New York of 34 felonies in 2024, our county's top law enforcement official not only didn't blink, he doubled down, famously releasing a video in which he suggested it's time to put a felon in the White House. Suddenly, the brash lawman was shamelessly in favor of crime. After Trump's victory, instead of focusing on the job he already had, Bianco dreamed of something bigger. Actually, he'd likely been dreaming of it long before that. Vast as it is, Riverside County wasn't big enough for him. He wanted to rule the entire state. Maybe that way people would stop blaming him for all those pesky deaths in the county jail. So in February 2025, Bianco became the first Republican candidate in the current gubernatorial race. He campaigned first wearing his sheriff's uniform and badge, then clad in a close facsimile after he was sued by opponent Stephen Klubeck for violating California Code Section 3206. That code states that, quote, no officer or employee of a local agency shall participate in political activities of any kind while in uniform, end quote. Klubeck has since dropped out. After more than a year in the race, Bianco has never polled as high as 20%. But even with such a small slice of the electoral pie, under California's top 2 jungle primary system, he stood a chance to help shut Democratic candidates out entirely in the June primary, leaving one of the nation's bluest states with only red-hatted candidates to choose from. That would have been more likely if Trump had stayed mum on the contest, or at least acknowledged that he had a hard time choosing between the two Republicans. More recently, Bianco made headlines for himself with a flamboyant bit of political theater, seizing ballots from last November's Proposition 50 congressional redistricting election, which wasn't even close, and attempting an unprecedented recount months after the issue had been decided and upheld in court. After the state Supreme Court forced him to put a hold on the stunt, Bianco admitted there was no fraud in that election. Days ago, still desperately clinging to Trump's election-denying coattails, Bianco suggested instead that the voting machines and system might have been, quote, flawed, end quote, claiming that, quote, we have former poll workers saying there is massive fraud going on, but nobody is looking into it, end quote. State election officials strongly disputed that claim and charitably suggested that Bianco might not understand how the system worked. Bianco might have expected a reward from his hero for his devoted blind loyalty and election-denying mimicry. He probably didn't expect to be swatted down instead. But after an Easter weekend debate between Bianco and fellow MAGA follower Steve Hilton, Trump ignored the sheriff and officially planted both feet onto the Hilton bandwagon. There wasn't a smidgen of ambiguity, and he even put it in all caps. Steve Hilton has my complete and total endorsement. He didn't even mention Bianco at all. Put musically, Trump snubbed the sheriff, but he did not snub his former deputy. Hilton, a former Trump advisor and Fox News commentator, promptly responded to thank Trump in his clipped British accent. Yep, Mr. America First chose a candidate who is only half American. London-born Hilton holds dual British and American citizenship over the all-American sheriff. Even shocked local Republicans pointed out that Hilton had only been an American citizen for a few years. Caught by surprise and still in uniform, Bianco stammered that the endorsement was, quote, a little shocking, a little bit disappointing, end quote, in his first TV interview after the story broke. But he bravely rallied, insisting that the endorsement didn't matter because, quote, it's the people of California who matter most, end quote. Right. The people of California. You know, those people whose election he tried to undo months after it happened. You gotta say, it's gotta hurt, said NBC Palm Springs news personality Fred Rogan, cutting. Hey, it's Janet Dagley with another Riverside rant. Poor Chad Bianco. It's no surprise that I'm not a fan of Riverside County Sheriff and Trump sycophant Chad Bianco. But right now, my heart goes out to him. For years, Bianco has tried to position himself as Donald Trump's #1 fan. Whatever position Mr. MAGA took, Bianco contorted himself to match it. Even when Trump was convicted in New York of 34 felonies in 2024, our county's top law enforcement official not only didn't blink, he doubled down, famously releasing a video in which he suggested it's time to put a felon in the White House. Suddenly, the brash lawman was shamelessly in favor of crime. After Trump's victory, instead of focusing on the job he already had, Bianco dreamed of something bigger. Actually, he'd likely been dreaming of it long before that. Vast as it is, Riverside County wasn't big enough for him. He wanted to rule the entire state. Maybe that way people would stop blaming him for all those pesky deaths in the county jail. So in February 2025, Bianco became the first Republican candidate in the current gubernatorial race. He campaigned first wearing his sheriff's uniform and badge, then clad in a close facsimile after he was sued by opponent Stephen Klubeck for violating California Code Section 3206. That code states that no officer or employee of a local agency shall participate in political activities of any kind while in uniform, and Klubeck has since. After more than a year in the race, Bianco has never polled as high as 20%. But even with such a small slice of the electoral pie, under California's top two jungle primary system, he stood a chance to help shut Democratic candidates out entirely in the June primary, leaving one of the nation's bluest states with only red-hatted candidates to choose from. That would have been more likely if Trump had stayed mum on the contest, or at least acknowledged that he had a hard time choosing between the two Republicans. More recently, Bianco made headlines for himself with a flamboyant bit of political theater, seizing ballots from last November's Proposition 50 congressional redistricting election, which wasn't even close, and attempting an unprecedented recount months after the issue had been decided and upheld in court. After the state Supreme Court forced him to put a hold on the stunt, Bianco admitted there was no fraud in that election, though still desperately clinging to Trump's election-denying coattails. Bianco suggested instead that the voting machines and system might have been, quote, flawed, and claiming that we have former poll workers saying there is massive fraud going on, but nobody is looking into it. And state election officials strongly disputed that claim and charitably suggested that Bianco might not understand how the system worked. Bianco might have expected a reward from his hero for his devoted blind loyalty and election-denying mimicry. He probably didn't expect to be swatted down instead. But after an Easter weekend debate between Bianco and fellow MAGA follower Steve Hilton, Trump ignored the sheriff and officially planted both feet onto the Hilton bandwagon. There wasn't a smidgen of ambiguity, and he even put it in all caps. Steve Hilton has my complete and total endorsement. He didn't even mention Bianco at all. Trump's the sheriff, but he did not snub his former deputy. Hilton, a former Trump advisor in Fox News, promptly responded to thank Trump in his clipped British accent. Yep, Mr. America First chose a candidate who is only half American. London-born Hilton holds dual British and American citizenship over the all-American sheriff. Even shocked local Republicans pointed out that Hilton had only been an American citizen for a few years. Caught by surprise and still in uniform, Bianco stammered that the endorsement was, quote, a little shocking, a little bit disappointing, end quote, in his first TV interview after the story broke. But he bravely rallied, insisting that the endorsement didn't matter because, quote, it's the people of California who matter most, end quote. Right. The people of California. You know, those people whose election he tried to undo months after it happened? You gotta say, it's gotta hurt, said NBC Palm Springs news personality Fred Rogan, cutting to the chase. Did Bianco expect loyalty from the man to whom he had been so true? Oh, bless his badge emblazoned heart. He clearly didn't know Trump as well as he thought he did. However sorry we Democrats may feel for the sheriff who would be governor, this is not the time to indulge in sympathy. We have our own problem in the gubernatorial race. Too many Democrats. Deflated and humiliated as he is, Bianco, with Hilton, could still shut all 8 Democrats out in the top 2 primary unless we consolidate our support around one or at least fewer candidates. It's to our advantage that Democratic voters far outnumber Republicans in the Golden State. But when our candidates outnumber theirs, and none of them gains enough traction to make the top 2, it's definitely a disadvantage. Thanks to, of all people, Donald Trump, California Democrats now have a better chance of making it past the primary. Let's not squander that chance. This is Janet Dagley, a proud member of the Riverside County Democratic Party.